5 years. That's how long it took to go from almost nothing to absolute dominance of every ocean on Earth. 1940, the United States Navy ranked 7th in the world, behind Britain, behind Japan, behind France, a regional force, coastal defense, nothing that could project power globally. 1945, larger than every other navy in the world combined, not close, combined, more aircraft carriers than the rest of humanity had ever built. More destroyers than most nations had total ships, enough firepower to control every trade route, every coastline, every strategic waterway on the planet. This isn't a story about ships. It's about the single greatest military expansion in human history, and how it created the foundation for American global dominance that still exists today. Here's what they never told you about how America built a navy that made empire inevitable, and why every carrier strike group patrolling the oceans right now traces back to 5 years of production that changed warfare forever. Let's start with a number that will break your brain. 1940, the United States had 7 aircraft carriers, 7, Britain had 7, Japan had 10, 1945. The United States had 99 aircraft carriers, 99, Britain had 14, Japan had 4, most of those sinking or already sunk. In 5 years, America built more carriers than the rest of the world had built in the entire history of naval aviation, but carriers are just the headline. The real numbers are even more insane. Destroyers. 1940, 100. 1945, 873. Submarines. 1940, 112. 1945, 232. Cruisers, battleships, amphibious assault ships, patrol boats, support vessels. Every category. Exponential growth. And here's what makes this truly incomprehensible. This wasn't just building ships. This was inventing entirely new classes of warfare while scaling production to levels never seen before or since. The Essex-class carrier, 24 built during the war. Each one a floating airbase carrying 100 aircraft, each one more powerful than most nations' entire air forces. They didn't just build them, they mass-produced them, like cars, like refrigerators, industrial warfare at a scale that enemies couldn't match even if they tried. Now here's the question nobody asks. How? Because in 1940, America wasn't a naval power. Britain ruled the seas, had for centuries. The Royal Navy was the standard, the model, the force every other nation measured itself against. Japan had been building carriers for 20 years, perfecting tactics, training pilots, designing ships specifically for Pacific warfare. And America, a fleet designed for coastal defense, a navy that hadn't fought a major war since 1898, officers who'd never commanded large-scale operations, shipyards that had never built at scale. So how did this nation go from 7th in the world to absolute dominance in 60 months? The answer isn't just production, it's something more fundamental. America realized something other nations didn't. That naval power in the 20th century wasn't about tradition. It wasn't about seamanship or centuries of experience. It was about industrial capacity. And America had industrial capacity nobody could match. Think about what was happening in 1940. Europe at war, Britain fighting for survival, France falling, Germany controlling the continent, Japan expanding across Asia, and the United States watching. Not fighting, but preparing. Because American strategists understood something crucial. The next war wouldn't be won by the nation with the best navy in 1940. It would be won by the nation that could build the best navy by 1945. So they didn't try to match existing fleets. They built a production system that would overwhelm them. The Two-Ocean Navy Act, July 1940, authorized building a fleet capable of fighting simultaneously in the Atlantic and Pacific. The largest naval expansion program in history, $4 billion, equivalent to $70 billion today, allocated before America even entered the war. This wasn't rearmament. This was industrial transformation. Shipyards that had built commercial vessels started building warships. Factories that made cars started making aircraft engines. Steel mills that supplied construction started supplying armor plate. The entire American economy was being reorganized around one goal: build a navy faster than anyone thought possible. Now let me show you what that looked like in practice. Kaiser Shipyards, Richmond, California. Before the war didn't exist. By 1943, employing 90,000 workers, building Liberty ships, cargo vessels, at a pace nobody believed. The record? 4 days. From laying the keel to launching a complete ship. 4 days. Traditional shipbuilding took months, years for larger vessels. Kaiser was building functional ships in less than a week. How? By applying assembly line principles to shipbuilding, prefabrication, modular construction, standardized parts. The same methods Ford used for cars applied to 10,000-ton vessels, but here's where it gets interesting. That was just cargo ships. For warships, the timeline was longer, but not by much. Essex-class carriers took about 20 months from start to finish. 20 months to build a floating city with a crew of 3,000 and aircraft that could strike targets hundreds of miles away. Japan's Shokaku-class carriers took over 3 years, and they built 2. Total. America built 24 Essex-class carriers in less time than Japan spent building 2 ships. This is the power of industrial warfare. Not just building better, building faster, building more. Overwhelming the enemy with sheer scale. But scale alone doesn't win wars. You need technology, innovation, capabilities the enemy can't match. And here's where America's advantage became total. Radar. The British invented it, but America perfected it. By 1943, every American ship had radar systems that could detect enemy aircraft at ranges the Japanese couldn't match. Fire control systems. Analog computers that could calculate targeting solutions faster and more accurately than human gunners. American ships could hit targets at night in storms, in conditions where enemy vessels were firing blind. Damage control. The design philosophy that made American ships almost impossible to sink. Compartmentalization. Redundant systems. Training crews to contain flooding, fight fires, keep fighting even after catastrophic damage. Japanese carriers sank after single bomb hits. American carriers took multiple torpedoes, bombs, kamikaze strikes, and kept fighting. The USS Franklin, hit by 2 bombs that killed 700 crew. Should have sunk. Didn't. Crew contained the damage, sailed back to port under its own power. Was repaired and returned to service. This wasn't luck, this was engineering. Design. A philosophy that said ships are expendable but missions aren't. So build ships that can complete the mission even when damaged. Now let's talk about what this actually meant in combat. Midway, June 1942. The turning point of the Pacific War. America had 3 carriers, Japan had 4. Japan had better pilots, more experience. Superior aircraft in some categories. America won decisively. Sank all 4 Japanese carriers, lost 1. Why? Because American damage control saved 2 carriers that should have sunk. Because American intelligence broke Japanese codes. Because American industrial capacity meant losing 1 carrier was painful, but not crippling. Japan lost 4 carriers at Midway and never recovered, because they couldn't replace them fast enough. America lost Yorktown and had 4 new Essex-class carriers under construction. Losses were temporary setbacks. For Japan, they were permanent. And this is where you see the strategy at work. America wasn't trying to win individual battles through superior tactics. It was winning the war through superior production. Build more ships than the enemy can sink. Train more pilots than the enemy can shoot down. Produce more aircraft, more ammunition, more fuel than the enemy can consume. Attritional warfare. But with such overwhelming industrial advantage that attrition favored America completely. Let me give you another number that shows this. 1943. America produced 24 aircraft carriers. Japan produced 3. America produced 257 destroyers. Japan produced 9. America produced 11,000 combat aircraft. Japan produced 4,700. The numbers aren't even close. And that's the point. Because by 1943, Japan knew it couldn't win a production war. Its admirals understood the math. Every ship they sank, America built 5 to replace it. Every pilot they killed, America trained 10 more. The question wasn't whether Japan would lose, it was how long they could delay the inevitable. Now here's where this connects to something bigger. The Navy America built in those 5 years didn't just win World War II, it created the infrastructure for global American dominance. Because when the war ended, Britain was bankrupt, its fleet obsolete. Unable to maintain its naval presence globally, Japan was destroyed, its navy sunk, its industrial capacity shattered. Germany never had a real navy to begin with. And the Soviet Union, a land power, no blue water fleet, no aircraft carriers, no ability to project power across oceans. That left one nation with the capacity to control the seas, the United States, with a fleet larger than all others combined, with bases across the Pacific and Atlantic, with the logistics network to sustain operations anywhere on Earth. This wasn't planned. It was a consequence. The Navy built to win a war became the tool to maintain global order. And here's the genius of it. Once you control the oceans, you control global trade, because 90% of international commerce moves by sea. Control the sea lanes, and you control the global economy. Think about what this means right now. Today, every container ship crossing the Pacific, every oil tanker in the Persian Gulf, every cargo vessel in the Indian Ocean, all of them sailing through waters the U.S. Navy can close at will, not because America is policing them. Because American naval dominance makes piracy unprofitable, makes naval warfare between other nations almost impossible, creates a global commons where trade can flow freely. This is power, not exercised, just present. The threat that doesn't need to be spoken because everyone already understands it. And it all traces back to those 5 years, 1940 to 1945, when America built a fleet that made every other navy irrelevant. But here's what people miss about naval power. Ships are just tools. The real power is what they enable, power projection, the ability to put military force anywhere on Earth within days. An aircraft carrier isn't just a ship, it's a mobile air base, sovereign territory that can move to any coastline and deliver strikes deeper inland than most nations' air forces can reach. A carrier strike group isn't just ships. It's a complete military ecosystem. Air power, surface combatants, submarines, supply ships, intelligence platforms, capable of independent operations for months without touching land. The United States has 11 carrier strike groups. Nobody else has more than 2. Most nations have 0. This isn't just numerical superiority. It's a qualitative difference, a capability gap so wide that it's almost meaningless to compare. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Taiwan. Right now, a flashpoint. China threatening. Taiwan vulnerable. The United States sends a carrier strike group through the Taiwan Strait. No shots fired, no threats issued, just presence. The message is implicit. Touch Taiwan and you're fighting not just Taiwan but the U.S. Navy. And China backs down, not because of diplomacy, because the math doesn't work. China's Navy is growing, modern, capable in regional waters, but in open ocean combat against a carrier strike group, the outcome isn't uncertain. This is deterrence, not through threats, through capability so overwhelming that aggression becomes irrational. And it works. Has worked for 75 years. No major power war at sea since 1945, not because nations don't have conflicts, because fighting the U.S. Navy is suicide. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. The Navy America built in 5 years created a dominance that hasn't been seriously challenged in 8 decades, and might never be, because building a carrier-capable Navy isn't just about money. It's about expertise, infrastructure, experience, doctrine, all accumulated over generations. China is trying, has been for 20 years, building carriers, training pilots, developing tactics, and they're making progress, real progress. But they're building their 3rd carrier. America is building its 11th Ford-class supercarrier, each one more advanced than anything China has, and more importantly, America has 75 years of carrier operations experience, combat experience, logistics, coordination, the institutional knowledge that can't be copied or purchased. China is learning, but America learned by doing, in combat, against peer competitors, in conditions that forced innovation. That experience gap might be impossible to close, because the only way to gain it is through war, and war with the U.S. Navy is something no rational nation risks. So let's bring this back to where we started. 5 years, 1940 to 1945. The greatest naval expansion in history. But here's what makes it truly extraordinary. It wasn't just expansion, it was transformation. From a defensive coastal force to a global power projection capability that still defines modern warfare. The ships built then are long gone, scrapped, sunk as targets, obsolete, but the infrastructure remains. The shipyards, the training institutions, the logistics networks, the bases scattered across every ocean, the doctrine, the experience, all of it built in those 5 years, all of it still foundational to American power. And here's the final lesson. The Navy wasn't built to win battles. It was built to make battles unnecessary, to create such overwhelming dominance that challenging it became unthinkable. This is the ultimate form of military power, not using force, making force unnecessary through capability so total that resistance is irrational. For 75 years, no nation has seriously challenged American control of the oceans, not because of treaties, not because of alliances, because the capability gap is insurmountable. And it all started in 5 years, when America discovered that industrial capacity could create military dominance, that production lines could win wars, that building more, faster, better than anyone else wasn't just an advantage. It was victory itself, the most powerful navy in human history, built in half a decade, still dominating 3/4 of a century later, not through conquest, through construction, not through battles, through shipyards. That's the legacy of those 5 years. That's how America built dominance that still shapes every ocean, every trade route, every strategic calculation about naval power. The ships are gone, the dominance remains, and the nations trying to challenge it are learning what Japan learned in 1945, that you can't outbuild American industrial capacity. You can't match American naval expertise. You can't close a gap that's been widening for 75 years. This isn't about the past. It's about right now. Every carrier strike group at sea, every submarine on patrol, every amphibious ready group, all of it traces back to those 5 years, when America built a navy, and in doing so built an empire of the seas that nobody has figured out how to challenge. That's not history. That's infrastructure, still working, still dominant, still the foundation of American global power. 5 years that built 75 years of dominance and counting.